keep your eye open for that link to our YouTube page, and we'll also put the link to the presentation on our website so that you can forward that to anyone who may have missed it. So there are about 45 people registered for this webinar today, so that's great. Thank you very much for joining. Keep your eye out for our next webinar, which will take place on Wednesday, December 9th, by Carrie LaForge from Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, and he'll be talking about the Grazing Response Index. So if you have any questions during the webinar, you'll notice there's a text box on the left-hand side of your little webinar menu there. Feel free to type in a question, and then I'll moderate all of the questions at the end, and hopefully everyone gets a chance to ask Ahdia their questions. And then I'll also be passing her email and phone number along in the follow-up email after the webinar. So if you think of anything else that you want to ask her afterwards, please feel free to do that. I'd like to take a moment to note that in-kind support for this project has been given by the Saskatchewan Conservation Data Centre, and that this project was undertaken with the financial support of the Government of Canada and the Financial Department of the Environment. Now, a bit about Ahdia. Ahdia moved to Saskatoon in 2013, shortly after the completion of her Master's of Science at McGill University, where she explored large-scale patterns and predictors of impact for aquatic invasive species. As the Saskatchewan Conservation Data Centre's Invasive Species Coordinator, Ahdia has been focusing her efforts on the advancement of a provincial data repository for invasive species information. She also aims to increase public awareness and participation in Saskatchewan's battle against harmful non-native species by developing outreach and training material, promoting citizen science, and coordinating early detection efforts. Ahdia serves as a board member on the Saskatchewan Invasive Species Council and as a jurisdictional representative on the Federal, Provincial, Territorial Invasive Alien Species Task Force. Today, she'll be giving us an overview of the CDC-administered invasive species database, iMapInvasives. So I'm going to give control over to you, Ahdia, and you can take it away.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm just switching over control to you right now. Should pop up in a second. There we go.
Is that working now?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Kayla, and to all of you who are tuning in today. So as Kayla mentioned, my work is conducted through the Saskatchewan Conservation Data Centre. I came on board with them just a year ago in September of 2014. And many of you might be, or probably familiar with the CDC and its focus on native species tracking, sort of acting as a provincial clearinghouse for rare and endangered species information. So the CDC pretty recently expanded its profile to include non-native species data management. We're in a pretty great position to manage this. Within our small group that ranges between 4 to 6 staff, we have experts that are database and programming managers as well. We've got some in-house taxonomic expertise, or at least some pretty strong connections to that taxonomic expertise within the province. So the CDC was already receiving a bit of invasives information, sort of the bycatch of wildlife and plant surveys that are going on in the province, but this data was largely cast aside until they decided to adopt this iMapInvasives program. So this is just the homepage of the CDC's website, just to highlight that we do have invasive species resources, and under apps right here, you'd also see a link to iMapInvasives. So iMapInvasives came on board in 2012, and it was, so now it's our organization's data repository for this information. Of course, it'll be the focus of my presentation today. So I just want to note that even though it was introduced in 2012, there wasn't really staff or much support until pretty recently. So since I've come on board, a good chunk of my time has been spent trying to improve the program based on user needs, just, you know, putting in map layers that are specific to Saskatchewan, things like that, as well as spreading the word and trying to access some historic data sets that are out there. I also do quite a bit of quality control on the data that we receive and provide some general assistance to users of the database. So at times, I do also serve as a bit of a general contact point for invasive inquiries, which is often just me redirecting people's questions or photos that they send in, asking me to identify species. So if you do find yourself with any questions about that or want to know some information about who's doing what in the province, in terms of some of the data that we'll highlight today, feel free to shoot me an email. And as Kayla mentioned, she'll be sending my contact information along after the webinar. So first off, I just want to cover some of the basics on the subject. Non-native species, they can be defined as species of plants, animals, and microorganisms that have been introduced by human action outside their natural past or present distribution. These species can originate from distant or nearby geographies. You know, something that's native to one part of Canada can be invasive in another, and so on.
Ahdia, sorry, I'm just going to stop you for a second. I just got a comment that someone can't hear you.
Okay.
If other people can't hear you, can you please type that in the question box? If something's wrong here, I'll figure it out.
Sure. Can I see that question box or no?
Okay, someone else just said that they can hear you just fine, so it might be on someone else's end there.
Okay.
Hey, never mind. Go ahead then. Sorry. Yeah, other people are saying they can hear you, so go ahead.
Okay, great. Sorry about that to the one person who's having trouble. So yeah, as I said, species can originate from sort of distant or nearby areas, and they can also be introduced either as an accidental result of sort of shipping or transport of species, or as the result of intentional introduction. So things that are brought in for agricultural diversification, ornamental plants that are brought in escape, things like that. There's tons of pathways. So invasive species are those non-native species whose introduction causes or is likely to cause some economic, ecological, and or social harm. So there's a lot of definitions out there, especially surrounding what constitutes an invasive species. And you know, there's a lot of things floating around, but here I've just stuck with the Government of Canada's definition as outlined in the 2004 National Invasive Species Strategy. So it's important to note that not all non-native species are actually going to establish when they are introduced to an area, and even of those that do establish, only a small fraction will actually have noticeable negative impacts. So this diagram right here, it just serves to illustrate this point, sort of this concept called the TENS rule, which is a little bit, you know, more of a rule of thumb than an actual predictive tool, but it was put forth by Williamson and Bitter in the 1990s, and it's just saying that, say for every species that are actually introduced to a region, maybe about 10 of them will establish, and of those 10, maybe only one will actually cause negative impacts and become invasive. But as we can see here, just this little map of global shipping routes, there's ample opportunity for introduction. So even though a lot of these species do get filtered out and don't actually establish or then cause any negative impacts, there's tons of things being moved around. So we always have to be vigilant about new species coming in. So of that small fraction, the ones that do establish and proliferate, they can have devastating consequences. Non-native species are the second leading cause of local and global extinctions. They can alter habitat structure and ecosystem function. They're known to alter fire regimes, enhance disease transmission, create new contaminant pathways. They cause a lot of damage to ecosystem service, or have the potential to, associated with agriculture, forestry, fisheries, and water quality. So this can have huge economic and ecological consequences. One of them being the reduction of property value. So there's quite a few invasive aquatic plants out there that, due to their sort of clogging recreational waterways, they've actually reduced property value, lakefront stuff. So there's a lot of invasive species of concern within Saskatchewan, and I just have a few highlighted here. Pictures are always nice. Starting with the top left, we have flowering rush, which is a prohibited plant in the province. There's one known location in the province, and the Native Plant Society has been working on the eradication of it for a few years now, which basically consists of getting a bunch of volunteers out there and digging up tons of mud and dirt and trying to get this plant under control. Then we've got wild boar seen here. We've got a few occurrences on iMap for wild boar. As a lot of you have probably heard, they're in the province and kind of spreading. We're working with the Ministry of Environment a little bit to get some more observations in from staff, but that's been a bit of a slow process right now. Can you still hear me fine? I'm getting a weird notice here.
A lot of people are saying that they can hear you just fine. It just seems to be a little bit off for one person, so it might be a problem with their computer. But a lot of people are telling me they can hear you fine. So.
Okay, great. Now I just had a notice pop up saying there was a connection problem.
Okay, well, I'll interrupt you if there's an issue.
Okay, thanks. So here we've got Eurasian water milfoil. It's pretty nasty aquatic weed. It's one of those few that are known to reduce recreational value of waterfront property. It can impede boating activity. As you can see here, it just completely covers pretty deep lakes and it'll come right up to the surface. It's not known to occur in the province, and there's a few native lookalikes, and we once in a while will get reports of it, and it ends up being usually northern milfoil or something like that. But it's great to have vigilant citizens out there sending in photos of what they think is the invasive. Here we've got leafy spurge. It's currently listed as a noxious weed in the province, and it's native to Eurasia. We have a lot of data on this because there's a huge effort right now to try and keep this plant under control. So we've got thousands of observations and treatment records in our system right now for it. And this plant has a toxic sort of substance that can have toxic effects to livestock. It's largely unpalatable, and it can cause skin irritations in humans. And then here we have zebra mussels clogging a water intake pipe, I assume. And so these guys were introduced to the Great Lakes in the late 1980s, and they've been spreading steadily throughout North America. They were recently found in Manitoba, and so they're a pretty big threat to Saskatchewan. As you can see here, they just start clogging infrastructure, so they're a huge economic threat, and just the sheer numbers of them and the way that they'll filter the water also causes a complete shift in lake systems. So there's something that we're pretty vigilant about here in Saskatchewan right now. So this year, actually, the CDC, I just want to put a little plug in for the Aquatic Invasive Mussel Monitoring Program. It was sort of a joint venture led by the Ministry of Environment Fisheries Unit with Fish and Wildlife. The CDC helped provide that data management support through iMapInvasives and also some field data collection. And we worked with watershed groups and a lot of regional organizations who actually went on the ground and were looking and sampling for zebra and quagga mussels. So just one of the ways that iMap was able to sort of be an integral part of provincial monitoring strategy. So what can we do? The best thing, of course, is to prevent introductions. There was a bioeconomic risk assessment that kind of ended up just given the old saying of an ounce of prevention was worth way more than a pound of cure, obviously. If you're going to put your money anywhere, prevention would be the place to put it. And in Saskatchewan, we do have a few pieces of legislation that concern this prevention side. We have the Weed Control Act that lists prohibited noxious species of aquatic and terrestrial plants, and also a prohibited fish list. So we do have some checks in place in terms of prevention, but of course things do get through, and so the next best thing is to treat new introductions before they become major issues. And this is where mapping programs come in. They can be really great tools to help facilitate early detection and the rapid response of new infestations. So there's a lot of mapping programs out there, and so when Saskatchewan was, well, the Saskatchewan Conservation Data Center was deciding on a system, there were a variety of considerations. There's, I'm sure many of you have heard of EdMaps. It's another great mapping program that's out there. There's a lot of provincial databases that have been developed, but we decided to go with iMap because it's already an existing system that came with its own technical staff. We're a North American network of provinces and states, and we have programmers in Florida that take care of a lot of system glitches. And I think probably more importantly, it was the fact that iMapInvasives, unlike other mapping systems at the time, was able to store absence data. So you can put in surveys where you went and looked for something, you didn't see it. So we can actually store that type of information. As well, we were able to store polygons. So it was a bit of a more powerful GIS system. And at the time, it was also the only system that was open to receiving data for plants, animals, and insects. So aside from requiring sufficient internet speed and a compatible browser, which is basically everything other than older versions of Internet Explorer, there's really no need to purchase any software for users. So it's very affordable and it's very easily accessible. So just briefly, what is iMapInvasives? As I mentioned, an interactive invasive species mapping tool. We have different provinces and states have their own system, but we are part of a North American-wide network. So the Saskatchewan iMapInvasives will only map and track invasive species that are within Saskatchewan. It stores occurrence, treatment, and survey records for non-native animals and plant species. As I mentioned, it facilitates early detection and rapid response. The early detection, if you have a lot of folks out there putting in information, that can really help catch something a lot quicker than say a land manager who has a ton of area to focus on. So they can go into iMap, set up an email alert, and so when anyone puts in information that meet their criteria, they'll get an email notification. So that allows them to sort of respond rapidly, I guess. So data can be submitted online. I'll do a little demo of the online data submission, but it can also be entered through, bulk uploads. I'll show you on the CDC website, we've developed some bulk upload forms. But the big thing here is that it's quality controlled. I sort of go in and based on photos, based on the people who are putting in the information, I'm able to verify data. If I can't verify it based on that information, I will get in touch with the person to see if they can give me any more information or go back and take photos, stuff like that. So everything we do have on there, you can be pretty certain of. So who is iMapInvasives for? As I mentioned, land managers, all sorts of organizations within the province are doing invasive species work. It allows them to explore the existing data and manage their own data. So you can go in, if you're a new weed inspector of an RM, you can go in, look up your RM, look up surrounding RMs, and just take a quick look at what's in the area and what some problems are. And then at the same time, you can manage your data. So especially for spraying records, there's a legal obligation to keep track of those. You can put that into iMap, and then it'll be in there indefinitely, and you can access it whenever you like. So researchers, it allows researchers to access this current and historic occurrence data, the treatments, and the survey records. Last year, I was able to, it was pretty great that it happened so suddenly, but I was able to share the data that we had on iMap on our aquatic weeds with a master's student out of, I believe, U of S. And he was just doing some risk assessment, and after speaking to him near the end of his project, he said that it was one of the most comprehensive data sets he was able to get from Saskatchewan, and that was largely thanks to NPSS, the Native Plant Society, who pointed me in the right direction beforehand to get that data. But now that it's there, it's sort of a one-stop shop for information. So citizen scientists, anyone can become a registered user and enter their invasive species sightings. And for educators, it's a great tool to engage students, just engage the public. Great outreach can be done through it. We've taken iMap out on a few weed tours that different organizations have had this summer, and I'll talk about it a little more later in the presentation, but we have a mobile app, and so we kind of took that out. If you look up these cities, there's little hot spots where we did these little bio blitzes of invasive species sightings. So how will iMap support my work? It's free access to a province-wide database. As I said, you can store and manage your information. You can also stay connected by looking at what other people have entered into the site. You can also see who the other users are and what organizations they are. So say you're one of the few people working on a certain species or region, you can see who else is working on that species or region within the province. You can perform spatial analyses and query the data by species, location, organization, any combination of these. I'll go over some, a little one in my demo. You can also set up email alerts, as I mentioned, and produce customizable maps and reports, which is especially great for folks who don't use GIS software within their organization, or even if it's just one person. Licenses and stuff can be quite expensive for ArcMap and stuff like that, so it's pretty nice to have a system where you can just put in your data and pop up the alerts that you like and then print it out. So there's 6 types of data that's stored into iMaps. We have observations where if you see an invasive species, you can just go ahead and plot its location in. Assessments where you can add a bit more information on each observations, so what the patch size was, what the density was, what the cover looked like. Surveys, where you draw a polygon, you can see here, this shape right here shows where these people, I guess, conducted a shoreline survey in this scenario. You show the area survey, what you looked for, whether or not you found species, and there's a ton more information you can put in. When I go through iMap, you'll see there's just countless fields that you don't necessarily have to fill in, and often there's really no need to, but if you're taking the pH, if you're taking temperature, wind, want to track who is in your crew, you can put all that information in and pull it out whenever you actually need it all summarized. So for treatments, similarly, you can add in a treatment polygon and write in all the details of the chemicals that were used, the concentrations, spray rates, who did it, all sorts of information can be put in there. So the other two types were also, I'll just go back here. We also have infestation managements and projects, and these are just both ways to group data. Projects, we haven't really used infestation management too much, but projects get set up, say for example, this year with the adult invasive mussel monitoring project. We set up a single project for that. We have 30 some odd users that are contributing data to that. And so now when I go into iMap, I can just type in that project and it'll pull together all of that information. So it's a pretty great data management option, especially if you have a lot of people entering data for your organization or your initiative. So here are just some quick stats on what we have up on iMap right now. We have almost 7,000 observations right now, over 1,000 treatments, and about 70 surveys. The majority of those surveys would be from the AIM project that was done this year. This is a pretty big jump from the about 400 observations that we had last year this time, and this just goes to show that we've had the opportunity to incorporate a lot of historic data sets, including the PFRA data set, some data that was taken out of national databases, such as the Aquatic Invasive Species database, which I think is a little bit outdated right now. I'm not sure if they've revamped it, but a lot of organizations that have just had backlogs of data that we've gotten into the system. We still have a long way to go with this. I know several organizations, including the Ministry of Highways, whose data we're working on getting into the system, and so hopefully I'll be working on that this winter. So we currently have 41 species that are being tracked in the system. We have well over 100 potential species that you could choose from. These 41 just represent the ones that we actually have an observation in the system for. There's 25 organizations that have contributed data. Again, we have over 100 organizations, so I think a lot of people are probably just going in and looking at the data and getting what they need from the system, but this just goes to show that 30 organizations are actively using the systems. Our observations span a good chunk of the province. We have 189 RMs, rural municipalities or urban municipalities that have at least one observation within them, and there's 7 projects going on right now. So now I'd just like to demo the site. Hopefully this will work. So this is just the home page that you'll see. So here we have, if you go to that link for iMapInvasives, if you don't have an account yet, you can click on this button right here, request a login. It just takes you to this page. It's pretty basic information, first name, last name, organization. And here it just asks for a little bit of additional information because I get these account requests, and then I'm able to, either by knowing what organization you work for, some more information that you put in there, I assign a user level. We have a tiered level system that goes from 1 to 10. And so depending, level 1s and 2s generally just deal with observations, whereas level 9 will get access to downloading data for a whole area. They're able to do treatments, surveys, manage projects, stuff like that. So if some of the stuff I'm going over in this presentation, if you do have an account and you're not able to access that type of information, feel free to shoot me an email and I can set that up for you. So this is just the request to log in if you don't have it. So here I'll log in with just one of our test levels. So this is the home page that we have. This is a test level 9, so you'll see they have access to surveys, treatments, assessments, everything's here. So we have the Enter Data tab, so you can enter observations, surveys, treatments, view the map. I'll go over this in a bit. View table, queries, and reports. Also up here you can see we have 4 different tabs. My iMapInvasives, which is the home page. Resources, which gives you links to our YouTube channels, some how-tos. These are just little PDFs on how to enter assessments, observations, stuff like that. And then all the way down here, we have field forms and stuff here. All the way down here, there's a link to the CDC Invasives resources page, if you ever find that you can't find that. So under data management, this is just pretty simple tools about how to view the tables, the options to perform data queries, stuff like that. And then here's system management, where you can view the projects you're part of. So if you click on that, this test level user doesn't have any projects. So I guess there's nothing really to show here. So just going through a demo of entering an observation. Sorry, this is going a little bit slower, but not too bad. So here the first step is to put in a photo if you have it. If you don't, that's fine, you can skip through, but they are really great. As I mentioned, we do quality control. So especially if I don't know about the infestation or something like that, it's great to have a photo so that I can confirm that it was identified correctly and everything. So you can just drag and drop your photos. The next step is, are you entering data? Who's entering the data, sorry. So you can say, yes, I'm the observer. That's generally all it is, and you go on to the next step. But if you're not the observer and you want to choose from someone, so I'll choose myself since I'm not under my account. I'll go ahead. Are you entering it for a project? Nope, not this time. And then here, what species did you observe? Here I'll do common tansy. And you can look this up by common name or scientific name. So here you see we get a little photo of common tansy. We get a link for further species information, which will take you to the plants database, the USDA site. Anyways, continue on. You can select the date that you saw the observation. So say I saw this April 22nd. And then you choose your region. Here we have a few options. We have lat, long, and decimal degrees, degrees, minutes, seconds, degrees, and decimal minutes, as well as UTM zones. So if you have the lat, long, that's awesome. That's probably the best way that you can store the data. If not, and you just know the address or you think you could tell it from an aerial view, you can go ahead and do that. So I'm going to just look up an address. So see, I've just put in my office address here. And I can zoom in and zoom out as I want. Let's say I saw tansy and it was right here. I can delete this later, so don't worry, I won't set off any email alerts. But so there you go. That's where I want my point. And then I go ahead and click next. And so now you can see, even though I didn't put in that lat long, I just put in the address. It'll pull that out for me. So in the future, when I want to download this data or pull it out, now I have all the coordinates for it. So it's just a summary of all that information. I can go ahead and click submit. And then now there's a few options. I can just go onto the map or go on and submit another observation. But I just want to go over this assessment here, because it's the only chance you have to enter an assessment. And that's basically just more details on your observation. So the assessment will be a polygon. You can see that's my observation right in the center. And this is a polygon that I can just drag and move around. So say I saw it just covering this entire area. I'll go ahead and draw that. Continue onwards. You can see here that it has my observation ID, so they're linked together. There's a bunch of fields here. I'm going to write test in here just so I know in the future, in case I forget I did this. But you can just put in anything. The disturbance severity in the area, the evaluation type. Is this an assessment you're putting in before you treat it so that you can compare? Is it just an initial assessment? Is it something else? So say, first noticed in 2013. Now spread. Really anything you can put in there. And again, here, percent cover of the infestation, it'll automatically calculate the area. So here we have the gross area in square meters based on the polygon that I just drew. So again, just some of the highlights of using a system like this, where it does have some GIS capabilities and it's doing those calculations for you. So again, yeah, was it scattered plant? Was it a monoculture? You can put in anything like that and update the assessment. So now, that's just another cool feature from this new version of iMap that we've had. We have show your iMap stats. If you click on that, so I just entered in one observation and one assessment you all saw. And so it was for one species, and you can just quickly get a little statistics on what you've put in, if you're interested in that. So another thing I want to go into really quickly is the map view. This is a pretty cool part of the program, I think. We're having trouble with our imagery, so I'll just choose another layer. You can see on the side panel, there's different layers to choose from, different overlays. There's this zoom function here where you can zoom into a rural or urban municipality, zoom into a managed area, the watershed or lat long, or you can just enter in an address here like I did previously with the observation. Street addresses, just generally remember to mention that you're in Saskatchewan because it can take you to another part of North America if you're not too careful. So here, say I want to look at Saskatoon. Sorry, this is going. There we go. So we've zoomed into Saskatoon, and you can see that none of these layers are turned on for our data. So if you want to look at the observations in the area, you can populate that, and then you can see we have clustering over here. So some of them, this one is 6. If I click on those observations, it'll give me a drop-down table of all 6 of those observations. You can see some are unconfirmed, some are confirmed. These are mostly purple loosestrife. And if I want to go to this specific observation and look at details of it, I can click on that link, and it'll show me. So this was something I saw, I guess, this fall, probably while I was walking my dog along the riverbank. And so I just put in the observation. So another thing here you'll see under the overlays that we have the assessments, treatments, and surveys. So you can go ahead and click all of those if you want, depending on what you want to see. And you can see they're all color-coded, and you can see whatever it is that you're looking for. So if I zoom into this right here, there's a treatment. That right there is the treatment ID, but if I click on it, it'll give me a link to that treatment that's here. And so this was from the City of Saskatoon's former weed inspector. There's a name I recognize. And so if you go in, you can see there's a treatment record. This was leafy spurge. The organization was City of Saskatoon. It was a chemical treatment. And then there's no other details in here, but there could have been if you wanted to put that in. So, you know, certification number of your sprayer, the exact chemical that was used, all sorts of information like that could have been put in. So another thing, say if I just wanted to print this because I was doing an end-of-year report or something like that, say I was the City of Saskatoon's weed inspector and decided that this was the best way to do it. I can go over here to print view, now that I have all my layers up. And then that's it. Give my Saskatoon weeds, give it a title, and then go to print. So now just really quickly, I want to look at the table view. So here we have all our observations in. As you can see, there's 6,937 in here. You can narrow this down through this if you like by putting in the observer, the common name, stuff like that. But a more powerful option would be to click on that custom data query. And so now you're taking to this where you're setting the criteria for your query. You can go in by geography type. And so there's a few options here: rural, urban, municipality, the managed areas, all sorts of stuff if you want to narrow it down that way. You can narrow it down by species, by the legal status. So say I just want to look at all noxious weeds in the province, and I only want to look at ones that were entered in for this year. So I'm going to choose here from January 1st, 2015 to today. Then I have a few options. So you see here that I've limited it by the state legal status as well as the date. I can add in a bunch more filters if I want. But for now, I'll just click View Table. And you see of that 6,000 or so observations that we had before, now there's just under 500. And we have all the weeds that are listed as noxious under the Weed Act that pop up here. Another option in the query table is to view it, view it on a map. So now this takes us back to that map view, and it'll populate it with all those observations that fit our criteria of our query. So this is really nice because if you're an organization for, I'm just changing the background there. So you have all of those 460 odd observations in here showing your custom query. So it's pretty great because if you're an organization that just wants to pull out your own observations, you can go ahead and do that through the query. If you're only interested in this year's observations that you've entered, you can go ahead and query that out as well. So we can do similar queries on surveys, treatments, everything. Here you can see we have about 71 surveys listed. And so if I'm interested, say, in the project that was done this year, the AIM project, I can go in here, put in AIM 2015, because that's what we decided to call it. And you can view this in a table again, or view it on map. So I'll pull up the map view. So you can see all these little blue spots. They're all the surveys that were done. Sorry, I just want to zoom in here a bit. So you can see all of these surveys that were done throughout the province. Now, if I wanted to make a map of this, say I'm doing a little final report on what's going on, I can go ahead and turn on any of these layers here. So I'll turn on the basin layer. Maybe that one's relevant for the aquatic surveys. I can turn on the rural municipality grid if I want, the parks, anything like that, and then go ahead and print it if I like, or just take a screenshot and print it myself later. So another thing right here is the email alerts. If you, as I mentioned, you can set up alerts for setting up your criteria however you want it. Here you can see that this test level 9 has no alerts so far. They would all show up down here, and you can delete them or modify them if you need. And so there's a few different alert types. There's continual, which will give you an infinite amount of alerts every time someone puts something in. Early detection or new to geography. So say I want early detection, and I only want to know the first 5 times something enters my area of interest. And say right now I'm going to just be interested in the Assiniboine watershed. I'll put that in. I can put in a buffer distance if I want, and I can choose a species that I'm interested in. So say I'm interested in zebra and quagga mussels. Well, this one's just quagga mussels. I'd have to set up a separate one for the zebra mussels, but we're hoping to change that in the new version of iMap so you can put in several species. And so this is connected to your email address that your account's under, but if you want to add additional contacts, you can go ahead and put those email addresses in there. So then you create your alert. And so now every time that something is entered and confirmed by myself, you will get an alert saying that, alerting you of the observation that was put into iMap, and you can go ahead and take a look at that. And just the last thing on this little demo that I'd like to go over is this My iMapInvasives tab. So you can go ahead and download the data as an Excel table, the CSV format, data that you entered, data that your organization entered, or data that's within your geography of interest. And so this is a level 9 user, so they have access to, say if you are an RM weed inspector, I can set you up with your geography being that RM that you work within, or that range of RMs that you work within. So then you can have access and download the data, even that other people put in, and then create tables for any reports, stuff like that that you'll need. And another option is to download it as a geodatabase. And this, I don't know how many folks actually use this, but this is a pretty neat tool for myself. When at least with the surveys that we did with the AIM project, I was able to pull these out really quickly, just download it for the entire province, and then I had it all those different fields, whether they were empty or not, they were up on my database, and I was able to just quickly query what I wanted out of it. So for those of you who do have your in-house GIS systems, it's still pretty useful tool here. So next, I just have the CDC's Invasives page. I just want to put a quick plug in for this because it's pretty basic, but I've put together quite a few little resources that I've come across. I had a bit of trouble gathering together a lot of efforts that were going on in the province when I first started up, and so here you can just see under additional resources, we have a few things. The non-native species list that the CDC has been working on, the Invasive Species Council link, some links to fact sheets that are all through the Invasive Species Council, a plant ID guide that I think was put forth by the Ministry of Agriculture, list of RMs and UMs with weed inspectors, and a link to EdMap's Prairie Region, which is another mapping service that I mentioned. And so here we have just basic stuff, what's iMaps, and the stuff I'm covering in my presentation. We have some links to the different fact sheets and protocols and data submission guides for aquatic invasive species, as well as a little step-by-step PDF guide for entering basic information, just observations, setting up email alerts, requesting an account on iMap. And just one thing I want to go through is this bulk data load form that we've created. I have it up right here. I'll pull it up. And this was a pretty great tool. I quickly realized that, you know, when people had information to put in, they often had several hundred point records, and doing that one by one, as you saw, it wasn't too time consuming, but if you had 100 to do, that would get pretty irritating. So we put together this little bulk load form that's very similar to the other load forms that we have with the CDC for native species data that's submitted. So this is just our metadata page, just in case I need to get in touch with you about the information, just your contact information. And then here's where you put in all your information on your observations. We just have iMap username, so this is mine. I can go ahead and put in. The CDC is my organization. If this was part of a project, I'd go ahead and put that in. If this is sensitive data, say, for example, it's going to be used for academic purposes, or it's part of a project that you can't release this information on yet, you can go ahead and put in whether or not it's sensitive. For the most part, for invasive species information, I really haven't gotten any. There's only been one time that I've gotten sensitive data, so we've got it in there just in case you don't feel comfortable sharing it but want to send it over. So coordinate system, just choose whatever it is. You can put in your locational information through any of these ways. We've kind of just put a gradient of the ones that we'd like to see most. So UTM zone or lat long are ideal, as well the, not UTM zone, sorry, the easting and northing, as well as the quarter section. We're always happy to take that because we have the ability to flag the observations as approximate. So if you just have quarter sections, you can send that in. It's not really an issue. But of course, if you have the exact location, that would be much more preferred. And then species information, you can go ahead and put in either scientific or common name. We have a list of, just to make things easier when I incorporate into the data set, we have a list of all the species names that are as they are in our database. So if you can use the exact spelling and everything that's in there, that would be awesome. And then just any general comments that you have. And then here I've also added treatment information because quite often we get just point locations for treatments. As I mentioned, they are polygons within iMap, but I generally just take the point data because folks are just spraying the individual plants, and I buffer it with a 5-meter buffer just so that it's compatible with our system. And so again, here you just choose from the drop-down menu. These are the same options that are available on the on the treatment forms on iMap. So was it grazing? What was it? What was your goal? Just put in whatever information you have there. So that's it for that. We have an attribute help section here, just in case you need any additional information on any of those field names. Sorry. So as it stands today, our major focus has just been trying to track and manage this data and collect as much information that was out there in the province. We want to continue this and create better apps, better bulk load forms, better training materials, stuff like that. But there's a few other little initiatives and collaborations that we work on. So for mobile apps, we have a phone app that's currently in beta release. You can find it on the iTunes Store or the Google Play Store under iMapInvasives, all one word. But we've had a few issues in it. It's still on sort of a trial release, so I haven't been advertising it too widely. I will be sending out an email notification to all our users once that app is launched. I'm pretty happy that it won't have a million glitches in it. And so hopefully that'll be before the next growing season. We have bulk upload forms that I just showed you. We're hoping to work on some more bulk upload forms, maybe for surveys, maybe for assessments, stuff like that. But for now, the majority of the information I got was observations and treatment in that format. So it's been working very well. And we did a trial run last year, and I've put in that information. It's been very smooth. So that's out for anyone to use now. And as well, for organizations that have in-house GIS systems, we're always happy to receive that data as well. It might take a bit of tweaking on my end to get everything in the format that we need to put into our database, but that's fine. And so if that's the case, feel free to shoot me an email and we can coordinate that. So video training material, I hope to do that this winter, just basic how-to guides for observations, setting up email alerts, all that type of stuff. And this is kind of a big one here, collaborating with other invasive species mapping programs. So in the prairie region, there's an EdMaps. It's for Manitoba and Saskatchewan, and EdMaps is a pretty great program, and it has really great apps. So I'm hoping to set up a closer collaboration with the EdMaps prairie region so we can get routine data exchange going. Hopefully I'll get in touch this winter to try and get the ball rolling on that, but it's been a bit of a slow process just because there's so much other data that was on my plate and I was happy to work with. So hopefully we'll get that going though, so that it's sort of a one-stop shop, both at EdMaps or at iMap, whichever you prefer, you can find the same information. That would be ideal. I'm also working on a comprehensive list of non-native species that are established in the province. It's kind of been a longer process than I originally thought. As I mentioned on iMap, we only have about 40 or so species that are actually entered right now, and those are kind of the big hitter invasives that people are concerned about. But I want to put a list together of just all non-native species, whether or not they're beneficial in the province, whether or not they're just benign or seemingly benign. I'd like to have them all in, and so there's been a bit of data mining and just double checking that I've had to do. But right now my list is up to about 500 or so plants, insects, and vertebrate animals. So hopefully this winter that'll get done. We also have the Don't Let It Loose campaign that we're hoping to launch maybe this winter in conjunction with the Saskatchewan Invasive Species Council. This past summer there were a few instances of pet releases, and they found red-eared slider in Wascana and a few other things, and we realized that there really isn't any messaging within the province to inform pet owners about the risks of letting your pets go. Even if they don't establish, there's always the chance of transmitting disease and stuff like that. So we'll hopefully get those pamphlets and educational materials out on our website, on the Invasive Species Council's website, and sort of at aquariums and pet stores throughout the province. And the last thing is a REST service. So this is probably more relevant to folks who have their own in-house GIS systems. This past fall, we put together sort of a live link to the iMap database. So far it's only been done for observations. Hopefully we can work on trying to get in our treatment records and assessments and some of the more complex data in. So if you do have a need for this and you'd like to maybe see iMap's data incorporated into your own GIS systems, just give me a holler and we can try and work that out. And that's it. With that, I'll take any questions and hand it over to Kayla.
All right, thank you. Well, that was really good. I really enjoyed that. I learned a lot. I hope other people found that as useful as I did. Okay, I got a couple questions here.
Kayla, did you take back control?
No. Oh. Not. You know, if you just right click on my name and make me the presenter, it'll bring me back over.
Sorry, I'm just looking for that.
No, that's okay. I'll probably be about half down the list there in the K's.
Okay.
Awesome, thank you. All right. So I have a question here. Is anyone aware of where individuals in Alberta would input observations as part of this North American network? Do you know anything about that?
Wait, sorry, could you repeat that?
Okay, where would individuals in Alberta, or anyone else really outside of Saskatchewan, where would they input observations as part of the larger North American network?
Okay, so I'm looking right now. I think Alberta might have iMaps. I'm not sure, and in Canada, the provinces kind of all, yeah, so Alberta has iMaps. I'm not sure if that's, if you go to the Alberta Invasive Plant Council's website, I'm seeing they have a link to Alberta iMaps. And so I'm not sure if that's the system that their managers or government or anything has fully adopted, but that's a good place to start. As I mentioned, iMaps has awesome apps on there that you can just put on your phone and you can put in that information while you're in the field. So maybe start there.
So can anyone in like anywhere, can the larger North American network, do they take these observations as well?
Yeah, so I'm not an expert in it, but from what I understand with iMaps, they have like a United States view. So that's in Canada, I don't think we have it yet. Someone else might have a better idea of it, but I've been talking with Chet Newfield at the Saskatchewan Invasive Species Council about this, because it would be great if we had a Canada-wide map. And iMapInvasives isn't really the place to do that.
Right.
We're more about managing this data, but that's what I mean, where it would be awesome for us to be able to hand over our information to help fill in gaps for range maps of Canada-wide ones. But from what I know, I think iMaps might have the US view and then individual provinces. Because I think BC is with someone else, Saskatchewan, so yeah.
Okay, no, good to know. Good thing to maybe explore a bit more for anyone that's interested. Is the Ministry of Agriculture involved in this project? I believe they are responsible for administering the act. Do you know if anyone from Ag is involved?
We work, well, they're not really involved. They're involved in the project where I'm invited to come out and do a lot of talks and try and promote the use of iMap. They really encourage people to use iMap, especially the weed inspectors, and with their weed management areas and weed management plans that they require for some of their funding programs. I get a good chunk of our users are working with that. So the Ministry of Agriculture, yes, like a lot of key staff use it. We get a lot of good information there. Whenever I do see a prohibited weed that pops up, I get in touch with the provincial weed inspector and just make sure that it's on his radar and vice versa, or make sure that we have everything on iMap that are those, those few prohibited weeds that actually are
right.
in the province. So yeah, in terms of administering the program, not really, but we work extremely closely with them, and I think they're a pretty big supporter of it.
Okay, good. How are occurrences confirmed, just to kind of get a sense of the reliability of the data?
Sure, so for the most part, this is something that I think in the next year or so we'll take a little bit more thought, but for the most part, I've gotten data from like sort of trusted sources. Like I got the PFRA data set, which was all confirmed within their organization. I got the Native Plant Society information and the Invasive Species Council, and all those people, I can trust their identification and the fact that they would have put that in. we've got, I don't know, 100 or so observations that I haven't confirmed that are in iMap, just because it'll take a bit more legwork. Like, I'll need to get in touch with people and see. And some of them, honestly, might not necessarily be worth it. Like, if I see, like, a dandelion observation and it's someone whose name I don't know, it's not something that I necessarily go after to confirm. But
Right.
yeah, it's always either through photos, through knowing who the observers are, or just me sending someone back an email and saying, hey, you put in this wild boar observation, say, for 2012. I'd like to know, are you confident in that, and so on. So I think it'll become a bigger issue with more citizen scientists and stuff like that, and that's something at the network-wide level we discuss and kind of share our thoughts about. So pictures are pretty big, are pretty big in helping confirmations, especially if you're a user who's not really with an organization that specializes in identifying invasive species.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Pictures are always useful. Kind of along the same lines, I guess, as that last question. The audience for this tool, just to clarify, is people who already have species identification skills, correct? So that's a little bit, it's an interesting question, and it kind of alludes to the same point. Maybe you could kind of point people towards maybe some identification resources.
Yeah, so as like on the Saskatchewan Conservation Data Center Invasives Resources tab, I put in our provincial weed ID guides and stuff like that. Like when I showed when you put in an observation and you choose your species, it'll give you a photo and a link to the species. So that's sort of to help confirm whether or not you're seeing what you actually thought you saw. But no, I think it's open to people who aren't necessarily weed experts. Like I, for example, am not a weed expert. And I walked down in Saskatoon and I was like, geez, I think that's common burdock. I've never seen that. I took a photo and sent it off to the Native Plant Society and got it confirmed. And then once I got that confirmed, I put it in. And so there's a lot of ways to work around it. I think for the most part, like if you're uncertain, I've always just asked people to send me an email, like when they put in their observations and say, hey, this was the observation ID I put in, I'm not sure. Or even in those observation comments, put in something of uncertain about ID, could have been this is what I base my, the species identification that you did perform there. Like what did you base that off of if you have some uncertainties? But the data, yeah, we really don't confirm anything that we're not pretty positive about. And that's been a bit of like vetting through some of the information that's out there and trying to get as much data as we can in the system. There's been a few sources that we've had to cut out and just not put into the system. Even though there's a lot of data there, it's just that if they didn't have the quality controls in place, we can't really trust it. And so with EdMaps, I don't know too much about it, but that would be one of the concerns if we do start doing a data exchange with them, would be to make sure that we're only taking in information that has been confirmed by a specialist, I guess. I think they set up people to confirm stuff, but I'm not too sure.
Right, okay, thank you. One last question here. Are all of the rural municipalities or cities and towns on board and supportive with the use of data entry of invasives or infestations in iMaps?
No, I think it's on a case-by-case basis. Like, not all rural or urban municipalities have weed inspectors, so a lot of them just aren't even, like they would have no reason to really be going into iMap or using it. Of the ones that do, as I mentioned, like they promote it pretty well at the weed. I went to a couple of weed inspector clinics and stuff like that where I talked about it. And I have, like, they do promote it as a tool, at least for vetting out what is in your RM, especially if this is the first year you're starting a weed management plan and you have no idea what's actually in there. If you take a look, you can see what's in nearby areas or what's been entered in your area. So not everyone is on board. There's a lot of people on board. I think one of the major hurdles has been, first of all, that people were having trouble putting in things one by one, which is why making a bulk observation load form and treatment load form was a priority for me. And as well, there wasn't that many great resources for helping people through step-by-step guides. And as I mentioned, iMap's been around since 2012, but I think it's been taking off this year just because you do need someone to help train individuals and do stuff like that and create videos for training and how-to guides. Because if you go through it step by step, it's pretty simple. But if you hand someone a geodatabase or tell them about it, it sounds pretty daunting.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, I just have one comment here. When viewing a species distribution on EdMaps, when you zoom out, you can view reportings both in your province and in adjacent states and provinces. Just kind of a note there, someone who must be working with it. I don't know if you knew that, but
no, and I think that's one of the great things about it. And I do go on EdMaps to check out what's in neighboring jurisdictions, which is why I want to submit our data there, so that there's not a gap in Saskatchewan. Right. But yeah, in iMap, you really don't get that. If Alberta and Manitoba and all our surrounding jurisdictions did have iMap, you'd be able to see it. Right. But they don't. In the States where they have, like Pennsylvania, if you zoom out, you start seeing New York's information.
Right.
Yeah, it is one of the downfalls of the database for sure.
Okay, well, if that's it for questions, I think it is. I'll just take a second here to show you our website and where this presentation will be uploaded. So if you go to our homepage here, pcap-sk.org, you go to the Communications tab and then the Native Prairie Speaker Series. The link to our YouTube page will be right here, hopefully within the next couple days. And then if you scroll down to the bottom of any page here, you'll see the links to our social media links. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and the link to our YouTube page is also here. And I'm just going to put in a quick plug for our conference in case you haven't heard of it yet. We have the Prairie Conservation and Endangered Species Conference coming up February 16th to 18th in Saskatoon. So that's pcesc.ca. If you're interested in that, you can go ahead and register and find out more. As mentioned, I will include Ahdia's email and phone number in the follow-up email. There will also be a few questions as soon as you exit out of the webinar, and I think at this time tomorrow you'll get another follow-up email. There will be her contact information as well as some questions, and if you can just take the minute to fill out those questions, that really helps us with our granting agency. So that would be greatly appreciated. So I'd just like to mention quickly again that in-kind support for this project was given by the Saskatchewan Conservation Data Centre, and that this project was undertaken with the financial support of the Government of Canada and the Federal Department of the Environment. So thank you again, everyone, for attending this webinar. I know I learned a lot, and share the link around if you think of anyone else that might be interested in seeing it on our YouTube page, and keep your eyes out for the next registration link for our next webinar, which will be on December 9th about the Grazing Response Index. All right, thank you, Ahdia, again for joining us and giving us that information.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. All right. Have a good day, everyone. Thank you.